Good morning once again. Today we are following in our study of sexual activity in marriage, and we are looking at the biblical statements that are found in the scripture concerning using sex as a weapon. We are looking at 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 7, and the phrase that we are looking at is the phrase in that verse that says, "Show her honor as a fellow heir." And so this is the title for this sermon today, Show Her Honor as a Fellow Heir. So having said that much, we need to continue. And this is number 3 in the parentheses. First of all, give her honor or show her honor. It's a Greek word or a Greek phrase, and we have taken a look with some profundity, noting that this is a present active participle of the Greek word aponemo. This is an idiomatic phrase, and it is a hapax legumenon. Oftentimes it's just abbreviated by saying this is a hapax, just using the first 5 letters of the word. Hapax means that this is a word which appears only once in the canon of Scripture. This phrase is idiomatic with the fundamental mental picture. In other words, when you say this phrase, there's a mental picture that comes to mind, and that is that as a husband, you are going to be giving some of your good fortune, which would be your status, your scale of living, your income, your privilege, to another. And this, in our context, would be the wife, whether deserving or undeserving. In other words, this is a sharing of this honor or a giving of an honor to the wife, whether she deserves it or not. This is this particular word, giving her honor. The etymology of this particular phrase, as we look at it, is a shepherd leading his flock to green pastures. And so if you can imagine that you are a shepherd in the old country, that you have a flock, and that the flock supplies you with income at the end of the year because you shear the flock for the wool, and that brings income to you. You also will butcher some of the livestock because that also brings you income, and it provides food for you and your family. And so the idea is that because the flock is benefiting you, then you benefit the flock by leading it to still waters, to green pastures. You give it medical help when it needs. And so this is the picture that is given here of the husband showing or giving honor to the wife. Now, somebody asked me, I think it was last week, if there's a connection between this word and the word to pastor. The verb poimino, or if you use the noun poimen, which is pastor, and the idea is yes, because pasture, flock, the whole act comes together as a ball of wax. You can't really have one without the other. The pastor looks over his flock. The flock, in turn, benefits the pastor. The pastor gives green pastures, still water, medical assistance, all of those types of things, so that the cycle can replenish itself time and time again. That is the picture that is given here when it says, husbands, give honor or show honor to your wives. There's a historical example of the giving of honor or the sharing of honor, the showing of honor, and it is the story of 2 brothers. The first brother's name is Aristobulus, and the second brother's name is Antigonus. These are real people. This is a real story that took place. It is recorded by the historian by the name of Flavius Josephus. This story takes place around a certain part of the world, And let me see if I can show you. This is a map which you have previously seen this morning. And let me... I'm going to make a circle around the piece of land or real estate that this story revolves around. And maybe you can see that circle right there. There is a purple landmass. That is what we call Palestine today. And so this story takes place when the Seleucids and the Ptolemies were struggling over that land bridge. As you can tell, there's this big area here, which is where the Seleucids held their power. And then there's this purple area over here, and this is where the Ptolemies had their power. And both of them were Greek. They were descendants from Alexander the Great and his armies. And the idea was that both of these parties wanted to convert or wanted to transform their part of the world into having the Greek culture and Greek privilege and all of those types of things. However, whoever held the power over this land bridge was able to be that merchant who would handle trade between this big area here and this other area, this purple area down here. Now, Egypt was always considered to be a very rich land in the ancient world because they had wonderful, plentiful harvest. You could always count that there would be a harvest there. The wheat would be the best wheat ever. The cotton would be the best cotton ever. Even today, Egyptian cotton is prized above others. And then the yellow area, the area that was controlled by the Seleucids, as you can see, it's a vast area. And this vast area contained many, many different kinds of people. And these people were like factories. They produced different kinds of goods, and they were manufactured goods. And so whoever controlled this land bridge would be able to control both of these things, and they would become even more wealthy than they already were. Well, it just so happened that somebody interfered with this political plan, and that was none other than the Maccabees. Okay. Aristobulus, sorry about that circle there. Aristobulus descended down a line of fierce Jewish warriors. This family gained distinction when Mattathias, Maccabeus, a country priest of Israel, began the War of Independence from the Seleucid Syrians. The Seleucids were descendants of Alexander the Great's general, whose name was Seleucus. The Seleucids very much wanted to transform the world to reflect the history, the ethics, the religion, and all of the stuff that accrued to Greece. They were interrupted by none other than Mattathias Maccabeus. And as you can see here, Mattathias is at the forefront of the picture. He's holding a sword in his hand. There is an altar behind him, and there is a dead body that's just clinging. He apparently was stabbed. He has a mortal wound. And he's trying to get back up, and so he's holding on to that hot barbecue grill with one hand. I don't think he's going to make it. So this picture is very evocative for you to see the great pain that started this War of Independence. Mattathias would be tantamount to like the George Washington of the United States. He was the chief general. He was the most prestigious of the military leaders, and he was given the nickname of Maccabeus or Maccabees, which means the hammer. And so Mattathias the hammer. This whole thing started when Mattathias, a country priest, was ordered to perform a public Greek sacrifice. Mattathias, whose real name was Hasmoneus, refused to kill the sacrificial animal and was replaced by a Hellenistic Jew. In other words, he was a turncoat. He was somebody who was not loyal to the Israelite cause. And as a result, he's called a Hellenized Jew. In other words, he was a Jew, but they had converted the inside of him, and he was now Greek in his sympathies. Mattathias, at the right moment, rose up and with his own hand killed his replacement, and then lunged at and killed the Seleucid officer who was supervising the ceremony. Mattathias went into hiding in the mountains of Judea. He was followed by his 5 sons, who were in turn joined by a growing army of independence fighters. Here we have the family tree of Aristobulus and his brother Antigonus. And so let me begin by pointing with the cursor. Here you have the Hasmoneus. This is the old man, great-grandpa. Then you have Mattathias. He is the hero with the sword in his hand. He then gave birth to 5 sons. The most famous of his, or the one who had the most success, is the one in blue. His name is Simon. And Simon, in turn, gave birth to 3 others. And the most famous of those is John Hyrcanus. And John Hyrcanus gave birth to 5 sons, and you have them down here on the bottom level. The most famous is Aristobulus, who is the person that we are talking about in this study. The brother Antigonus, which is this little box here. And I have the little box because the only part that he plays in this whole story is that he gets killed, and he gets killed by mistake. Not because somebody said, oops, it's because of certain intrigues that took place. Then you have 3 siblings that are in kind of pinkish boxes. These are the people that ended up going into prison. So, let me, this is the mother of the 5. She was to inherit Hyrcanus' kingdom when he died, and she then shared the throne with Aristobulus. Aristobulus didn't like that too much after a while, put his mom into prison. Aristobulus married Alexandra Salome, or Salome, if you want to call her like that, Salome. And as it turns out, Alexandra Salome figures out a way to put Antigonus to death. She is going to figure out a way to kill this brother-in-law. The other 3 are in prison. She doesn't have to worry about that. But Antigonus has been given the honor to be co-regent with Aristobulus. And this co-regency is Aristobulus showing honor or giving honor to his brother. This is precisely the same act that is called for in 1 Peter 3:7. Husbands, give honor to your wives. That is, if you're a king, she is a queen. And so it's important for us to see this because this historical event paints a beautiful picture of how that works. So Queen Alexandra Salome makes sure that Antigonus is killed so that she can be the remaining regent. How do we know that? Because her husband Aristobulus had gotten a bad disease and he had failing health, and the old man just died. So now she's the queen. She puts to death her brother-in-law, and there's a younger brother of her husband who is in prison, and she knows that she can manipulate him, and so she springs him out of jail and marries him he becomes the next king, and she becomes the next queen, but she is the one who holds the purse strings. She is the one who governs the country. So, where are we? She comes over here and marries Alexander, and they become now the ruling couple. Okay, having said that, Antigonus, that is the little brother, the one that is in the little box, the clear box. He and Aristobulus were good. Not only were they brothers, but they were good friends. They loved each other. They had a great relationship together. They fought together on the battlefield. They had respect for one another as far as military prowess was concerned. And so Antigonus is invited to a party. Aristobulus, who is the older brother, is the individual who changed the government into a kingdom. Up until now, Aristobulus belonged to a family that was just a priesthood family. But for the first time in so many hundreds of years, he wore a crown, and he became a priest and a king. This is the one time in the history of Israel when a person took on both of these particular offices. Now, there was one king in the Bible who took on the duties of a priest, and the Lord immediately sentenced him to an awful death. This time, Aristobulus was not sentenced to death. This is not part of biblical history, but it is part of history. This history is found between the Old Testament and the New Testament. It is recorded in the 14 books of the Apocrypha, which is a portion of books which is known as the deuterocanonical books. And these books are included in the Roman Catholic Bible. So you can read this in that Bible, or you can just get Josephus's histories and read out of that. Aristobulus made Antigonus his equal. That means Aristobulus was king, Antigonus was also king, because together they had defeated the territory of Etruria and annexed it to the kingdom. On this map, you can see this whole area up here. This area is called Etruria. Etruria. And they had fought together there, and they took that area and they joined it to the kingdom, and so their kingdom got bigger. They were carving out a piece away from the Seleucids, and this was great because nobody had ever been successful against the generals that succeeded Alexander the Great. Aristobulus put the rest of his siblings into prison. He also put his mother into prison because she contested, or she defied his government. Hyrcanus, the father, had left her to be the governess of public affairs. He didn't just say, you're going to be the next regent. He just said, you're going to just be the governess. When Antigonus arrived at the party, he was in kingly apparel, and he swaggered into the party with a double squad of his troops. He came in there with his spurs jingling and a-jangling. He had a beautiful armor, and he was accompanied with troops, so he made a grand entrance. Aristobulus, who I might add was sick at the time and actually was in a different place, was told, a courier went and said to him, listen, Antigonus has come to the party to kill you. And the reason for them to say that is because he came with an armed guard. And they're saying, look, Antigonus came to the party with an armed guard, and he came to proclaim himself as the only king. So you have two kings. One of them, the younger brother, is going to put to death the older one. Okay, let me back things up a little bit. In our passage of Scripture, 1 Peter 3:7, you have the husband, who is the king, and he is supposed to pass on this honor also to his wife. And so you have the natural Old Testament tendency that the wife wants to throw over or wants to kick the husband off of his throne. This is just an old sin nature fact of life. And so in this picture, you're able to see how that works. The assassination theory was evidenced by the armed guard that Antigonus brought with him to the party. Aristobulus was made to believe, in other words, the story was given to Aristobulus, that Antigonus could not endure this bare enjoyment of royal honor. Bare enjoyment of royal honor means it's not enough. I'm just a king by title, but I'm not enough. When it was in his power to take the kingdom for himself. And so this is the story that was told to Aristobulus, and a wedge was formed between two brothers. Two brothers that loved each other, had respect for each other, but somebody brought this intrigue into their mind, or into the mind of Aristobulus, saying, your brother has come here to kill you. He wants to be the only king. He can't stand to share the honor, royal honor, with you. He wants to have it all for himself. He could not stand to share being king. This is the use of the phrase that is found in 1 Peter 3:7, give her honor. We find the same phrase in the Greek of the story of Aristobulus and Antigonus. Aristobulus refused to believe this, but the rumors swirled in the palace, and Aristobulus began to believe the calumny. Number 6, Antigonus gets invited to a sickbed. Aristobulus reluctantly believed in the plot, but he took careful measures to assure his security. So people were saying, you got to look out for your brother, you got to look out for your brother. And so he reluctantly believed that. And so he took careful measures to make sure that no quote-unquote accidents would happen. And he took care not to discover his suspicions openly. In other words, he wasn't going to say, aha, all you guys are right. He kept this information under his hat. He also provided to be secure against any accidents. He made sure that no accidents were going to take place. Oh, what kind of accident could happen to a king? Well, maybe some poison would accidentally fall into his food or into his drink, for instance. So he took care that that wouldn't happen. There may be a slippery carpet, and he would slip and fall on a sword accidentally or something. He took care that those things would not take place. He also did something. He placed his bodyguards in a certain dark subterranean passage. This passage was a tunnel that would lead to the room where Aristobulus was. Aristobulus was very sick, and he set up his convalescence room in the citadel, which is now called Antonia. This is the citadel. This big building that you see in the forefront of the picture is the temple. And that little structure off to the side, which is really out of scale, is the citadel, or it was the strong fortress of the city. Later on, in the time of Jesus, it became known as the Fortress Antonia, and this is where the Roman barracks were. But for now, Aristobulus fixed himself a room in the basement of this citadel. The citadel was the strongest structure in ancient cities and therefore the safest place in any city. Aristobulus selected this place because it was difficult, if not impossible, to invade. The place was constructed very close to the temple and therefore had to have bridges and tunnels to get from one place to the next. Let me show you what I mean by that. Here's another picture, and once again the scale is out. But with my cursor, you can see that there are a couple of bridges up here, and that would get you from the fortress of Antonia, or the citadel, over to the temple. And then there were underground tunnels that would go back and forth. Not only would they go into the tunnel, but they would go back into this area back in here where there were palaces and other things like that. Aristobulus gave very special orders to his bodyguards. First order, that if Antigonus came unarmed, that they should let him alone. But if he arrived wearing his armor, they should kill him. So this is how he was safeguarding himself. Second, he also sent a courier to let Antigonus know beforehand that he should come unarmed. So then that way, he had all the bases covered. On this occasion, Queen Alexandra Salome cunningly discovered the matter along with those who had plotted to dethrone Aristobulus. The conspirators wanted to intercept the courier and to prevent the message from reaching Antigonus. So that was their idea. But she persuaded that the king's message should tell Antigonus that he had heard that Antigonus had gotten a very nice suit of armor that was made with fine martial ornaments in Galilee, and because his present sickness had hindered him from coming and seeing all of that finery, he very much would like to see him in his armor. Because, said he, quote, in a little time thou art going away from me, unquote. So that was the message that was transferred to Antigonus. So you know what happened to him when he showed up in that subterraneous passage. He was done in. Why? Because honor of kingship had been transferred over to him. He was in equal status with Aristobulus. What happened to Aristobulus? He was sick and soon died. And then his wife sprung one of the brothers, the younger brother, somebody that she could manipulate out of prison, and married him, and she became the dominant reigning queen. Okay, so here's our outline so far. We have noted etymologically that this means a shepherd leading his flock to green pasture. Historically, it's the story of Aristobulus and Antigonus. This participial phrase means that Christian husbands should, and let me begin with this, and this verse means that a Christian husband or Christian husband should, number one, not insult, lecture, boss his wife in public. To give her honor means that a Christian husband should not insult his wife in public. What does this mean? Well, it means, for instance, that something happens and you want to correct the error. You don't face your wife in public and dress her down because she said what she said or did what she did. This is how you give her honor. Now, let me just tell you something. There are a lot of women who don't understand that a Christian husband would be doing something like this, and so she tramples all over the way in which he treats her. And we must bear in mind that you as a wife, as a lady, have been given this position by God, and the husband obeys as a matter of course. Nor as a husband should you lecture her in public. Nor should you boss her around in public. Number 2, nor should you talk behind her back so as to be critical or to tell crude jokes about her. As the joke goes, somebody said, "Didn't I see you at the bar with the lady the other day?" And the guy says, "That was no lady, that was my wife." Well, that is just a crude joke. See, that has no place in the Christian husband's mouth. Number 3, do not compare her to your previous partner. If you've been married before, do not compare your wife to your previous partner, especially to your parents. You know, my first wife was a lot better than this one. Boy, did I stick my foot in it this time. No, it has no place for a Christian husband. 2 more. Number 4, do not compare her to your imaginary partner. If you were only like, and then you can fill in the blank. I don't know, we can go back several decades so as not to confuse things. You know, Tuesday Will, Raquel Welch, you know, somebody who was somewhat of a celebrity way back then. Eve Arden, you know, you take a Betty Boop. You take a look at some of those pictures, and age has not been kind. You do not compare your wife to some imaginary partner. And I know I've heard husbands say, "Well, you know, I have a crush on so and so." Don't do that. She is your co-heir. She is your fellow heir. You are to give her honor. That is your command. And then last of all, before we break, do not express contempt for your wife. In the anatomy of arguments, that is, when you're having an argument with your opposite number, it may be an argument over a detail. It was Tuesday. No, it was Wednesday. It was in the morning. No, it was in the evening. Details. But you are so enamored with your point of view that you escalate to the next location. Well, you never remember nothing. Well, you don't remember nothing because your brain is like a sieve. And the argument escalates and escalates and escalates. The breaking point that will tear your relationship apart, let me repeat, and we'll go through this again next Sunday, but the breaking point that will tear your relationship apart is when you bear down on contempt. And that is where insults are no longer necessary. It is, "I hate you." You get to that place, you are tearing your relationship apart. You must not, as a Christian husband, go there. And with that, we'll have to close for this morning. Let's retire for a few moments and come back after our break.